There, in the aisle, you stop. You weren't going to stop. You were reaching for yogurt. You had a list, or some version of one, half in your head, and your other hand was holding your phone, and you were thinking about something else. A meeting, or whether you'd remembered to send a message, or nothing at all, really, just the soft hum of being in a supermarket on a Tuesday evening. And then you stopped. You couldn't say why. You hadn't seen anything. You hadn't heard anything. There was no thought attached to it. Something had come into your nose, something faint, and before you could turn toward it, or name it, or even fully register that it was there, you weren't in the supermarket. You were in your grandmother's kitchen. You were 10. There was light coming in through the window above the sink, that particular afternoon light that meant school was over, and there was nothing yet to do. The fridge was making its old fridge sound, the one that started and stopped without warning. The floor was cold under your feet because you weren't wearing shoes. You weren't remembering this. You were there. The whole place was there. Then it was gone. The aisle came back. The fluorescent light. The yogurt in your hand. The list you couldn't quite remember. Someone moved past you with a trolley. 3 seconds, maybe. Probably less. You stood there for another moment, blinking, slightly off balance, like someone who had stepped off a moving walkway and found the ground strange. Then you reached for the yogurt again. It wasn't a thought. It wasn't a feeling first. It was a place. The whole place came back. You've had this before. Almost everyone has. A coat brought down from a cupboard. A stranger walking past you on a street. The air inside a building you haven't been in for years. And suddenly, you're not where you are. But it's worth pausing on how strange it actually is, because almost nothing else in your experience works this way. A photograph doesn't do this. You can look at a picture from 20 years ago and recognize yourself, recognize the room, feel a kind of fondness or sadness or amusement, and then put the photo down and keep going. The photograph reminds you. It doesn't return you. A song comes closer. An old song can carry you back to a particular year, to who you were when you first heard it, to the people you were around, to a kind of weather. But even a song doesn't usually drop you into a single 3-second moment with the temperature of the floor and the sound of an old fridge. A taste can do something similar to a smell, but only because most of what we call taste is actually smell, working sideways through the back of the mouth. A smell, on its own, does something that no other ordinary signal in your day-to-day life does. It doesn't tell you about the past. It puts you back inside it. There is a reason for this, and it has to do with the way smell takes a different route. When you see something, when you hear something, when you touch something, the signal usually has to check in somewhere first. There's a part of your brain that works a bit like a central station, a place where information from outside arrives, gets registered, sorted, and then sent on to wherever it needs to go. Almost every sense works this way. The light hitting your eyes, the sound entering your ears, the pressure on your skin. All of it stops at this station before it reaches the parts of you that decide what something means, or how you feel about it, or whether you've encountered it before. Smell doesn't have to. The signal from your nose can take a more direct route. It doesn't have to stop at the central station first. It can reach the parts of you that handle feelings and the parts of you that hold memory more directly than anything else you experience. It's the only sense that travels this way, the only one with that kind of pass. This is why the supermarket moment is so strange in your body. It's not that smell brings memories back faster than vision does, or with more detail. It's that the order is different. When you see your grandmother's photo, you recognize her first, and then the feeling comes, the warmth or the ache or whatever shape grief has taken by now. Recognition arrives, then emotion follows. With smell, that order can flip. You don't recognize the smell first, then feel something. You feel something first, and then you know it is a smell. The feeling beats the word. The place comes back before you can identify what triggered it. By the time you think the words, that's the smell of, you've already been there for a second. You've already been 10. Your body has already adjusted to the cold floor of a kitchen you haven't stood in for 20 years. Some part of you got there before you did. And that different route explains something else you may never have noticed. There's a tempting story you can tell yourself about what just happened. That smell somehow gives you a sharper version of the past, that the route is more direct, so the memory must be more accurate, more detailed, like a higher resolution copy of the day. It's a beautiful idea. It's also not really what happens. When researchers have compared memories triggered by smells to memories triggered by photographs or sounds, the picture that comes back through smell isn't more accurate. The names of people aren't clearer. The dates aren't more precise. If you tried to write down what you'd just seen, the kitchen, your grandmother, the year, the day, you'd get about as much wrong or as much right as you would from any other kind of memory. What's different is something else. A photograph gives you the look of the moment. A smell gives you the inside of it. You weren't seeing your grandmother's kitchen with more visual clarity. You were standing in it. You felt the cold of the floor through your feet. You were 10, which means your body was a different shape and a different height. And somehow, for those 3 seconds, it remembered being that shape. The light came in at the angle a 10-year-old saw it from. The fridge was loud, the way only a child finds a fridge loud, when the appliance is taller than you are and its sounds are part of the architecture. Smell doesn't bring back a sharper photograph. It brings back the heartbeat you had at the time, the temperature of your skin, the particular kind of attention a child has, half awake, half elsewhere. You don't remember the kitchen better than you would from a photo. You just briefly become someone who is in it. There is another thing this route may help explain. Notice that you were 10, not 25, not 32, 10. This isn't accidental. There's something about the memories that smell tends to bring back, and where in your life they tend to come from. It's a tendency, not a rule, but it shows up often enough to be worth looking at. If you ask people what year a song reminds them of, they'll often say something between 15 and 25. The years when you were figuring out who you were, when music was attached to people and parties and feelings you'd never had before. That makes sense. Those years tend to anchor a lot of the stories we tell ourselves about who we became. Smell doesn't seem to follow the same rule. When researchers have asked people to describe memories that smells bring back, the years that come up are often earlier, sometimes much earlier. The first 10 years, often 6 to 10. The years before you had a clear narrative about your own life, before you were old enough to start arranging your experiences into a story you could tell at dinner parties. That's roughly when you were standing on that kitchen floor, before you had words for what made a kitchen feel safe. Before you had a theory about your grandmother. You just had her and her kitchen, and the sound the fridge made. Maybe that's the strangest thing about smell. It doesn't seem to reach for the version of you that learned to speak about your life. It reaches further back, to a self that was still mostly body, still mostly attention, the you that was there before the story started. And if smell reaches back toward a part of you before language, that may explain something else you have felt around smell. You're at home. You've pulled an old coat down from a hook in a cupboard you barely use. You're going to give it away, or move it, or maybe just look at it. You hold it up. You catch the smell of it. And you stand there for a second, holding the coat half raised. You can smell it. You know it. You know exactly what kind of year it belongs to, what kind of weather, what kind of room. The smell is specific. It is unmistakable. But you cannot say what it is. You try. You reach for a word and the word isn't there. You try a comparison. It smells a bit like, and the comparison fails. You can say it's a little sweet, maybe. A little dusty. Like the inside of something old. Like a year. None of these are right. None of these are even close. This isn't only you. There's a strange asymmetry between how easily you can describe what you see and how easily you can describe what you smell. Ask a person to describe a color, and they can do it in a second. Red, pale blue, the green just before grey. Ask the same person to describe a smell, and they'll usually start by reaching for something else. It's like banana, like old wood, like rain on hot pavement. Borrowed words, borrowed objects, almost never the smell itself. People describing smells in English take much longer than people describing colors. They hesitate more, they reject more of their own attempts. They often give up. It feels, when you're standing there with the coat, as if smell simply lives outside of language. As if the part of your brain that handles smell and the part that handles words are connected by a road that's somehow always under construction. But the problem may not be smell. It may be English. There's a group of people on the Malay Peninsula whose first language is called Jahai. They live mostly by hunting and gathering. They've been there a long time. In Jahai, there are roughly 12 words for smells, not 12 descriptions of smells. Not 12 ways of comparing one smell to another. 12 actual words, abstract nouns, the way blue is an abstract noun, or red. That name smells directly. One of these words covers the smells shared by certain flowers, by ripe fruit, by a kind of perfume, by durian. Another covers a sharp, heady smell that runs through petrol, smoke, and certain animal droppings. A third covers the smell of cooked rice. Another, the smell of certain woods. Each word picks out a quality that runs through different objects, the way red runs through apples and stop signs and the inside of your eyelids when the sun is bright. When researchers asked Jahai speakers to identify smells, the words they used were consistent with each other. Different people, different days, the same smell, the same word came back. About as consistently as English speakers agree that something is blue. Now ask an English speaker to do the same thing. Pass a small bottle under their nose and ask, "What is this?" They will say things like, "It reminds me of a candle my aunt used to have, the one that smelled like cinnamon but also a little like leather, you know, that kind of," and trail off. Then someone else, given the same bottle, will say something completely different, also long, also uncertain, also borrowing. So smell isn't, by some absolute fact of human nature, beyond the reach of language. It's beyond the reach of English, and of most of the languages most readers of this episode were raised in. It's not that the Jahai have sharper noses. It's not that they're closer to nature. It's not that they've kept some ancient sensitivity the rest of us have lost. There's no romance to it. They're not more in touch with anything. It's that their language gave smell a place. It made room for it. The same way English made room for color, for direction, for time. Their language carved a small section of the world into named pieces, and smell happened to be one of those sections. In English, that section was left mostly blank. So when you stand in the cupboard, holding the coat, and reach for a word, there isn't one. Not because the smell is ineffable, because the language you happen to be thinking in didn't bother to put a word there. But even without a word for it, the thing still happens. If you walked through a European city 200 years ago, before modern sewers, before refrigeration, before any of the systems that quietly clean the air around you now, the first thing you would notice, before you notice the buildings, before you notice the people, would be the smell. It was thick, layered. A working city in the 18th or early 19th century smelled of horses and the things horses left behind, of unwashed bodies in close quarters, of meat hanging in butchers' windows in summer. It smelled of leatherworks and tanneries and dye shops, of food cooking in narrow streets, of human waste that hadn't yet been routed away from where people lived. There were also better smells, bread, herbs, flowers in season. But the bad smells weren't a feature of bad days. They were the air. People believed then that bad smells weren't only unpleasant, they were dangerous. That the air itself, when it carried the smell of decay, could carry disease, could enter the body through the nose and mouth and make you ill. This belief, whether or not it got the mechanism right, drove an enormous slow project across European cities. In many cities, sewers were built, streets were widened, cemeteries were moved out of city centres, markets were reorganized, refuse was carted away rather than left to rot. Over time, whole neighborhoods were redesigned with the explicit goal of reducing smell. You live, mostly, inside the result of that project. Your city most days doesn't have a smell, or rather, it has been engineered to not have one, to be neutral, slightly cool, slightly clean, slightly nothing. The air conditioning hums. The supermarket aisle is faintly chilled. The plastic on the yogurt is sealed. The room you live in has been ventilated, the carpet has been cleaned, the air freshener has been installed, but it means something for the supermarket moment. Your great-grandmother would not have been ambushed by a smell. She lived inside smells all the time, in layers. And so the smells of her childhood were never sharply absent. They were always somewhere, dim or strong, in the world around her. You live in a quieter room. And that's why when a smell does arrive, when it slips through, somehow, in a yogurt aisle on a Tuesday, it lands the way a sound lands in silence. It is louder in your life than smells used to be in anyone's. Not because the smell itself is louder, because the room around it is so much more empty. You can't make this happen. You can sit down, close your eyes, take a slow breath, and say to yourself, "Take me back to my grandmother's kitchen." Nothing will happen. You'll see the kitchen the way you see anything you remember, at a distance, slightly faded, with the strange flatness of something you're observing rather than living in. The fridge won't be loud, the floor won't be cold, you won't be 10. You'll be exactly the age you are now, eyes closed, in the room where you're sitting, trying. You can think about it as much as you like. You can describe it. You can tell someone the story of it. None of this will return you. And then, one evening, in a supermarket, holding a yogurt, there it is. That's the strange thing about it. It doesn't come when you call. It comes when something else calls. Some particular smell, drifting from somewhere you didn't think to track, finds the part of you that doesn't ask permission first. The signal travels its different route. Before you've even registered that there's a smell, you're somewhere else. You don't get to choose when. You don't get to choose where you go. Most of the time, you don't even get to choose whether you wanted to be there. In some way, that's hard to put your finger on. This thing isn't yours. It belongs to your nose, your body, that particular path that doesn't have to check in. You're the one it happens to, but you're not the one running it. You can't summon it, and you can't refuse it. The next time something ordinary brings a particular smell into your life, you will be returned again, for 3 seconds, somewhere. Probably to a place you weren't expecting, probably to a self you haven't been in a long time. You'll come back, you'll keep doing whatever you were doing. The 3 seconds are over. She's standing in the supermarket aisle, the yogurt still in her hand. The fluorescent light is the fluorescent light again. The trolley she half saw a moment ago is gone. Someone is reaching past her for almond milk and saying sorry without really looking. The hum of the freezers is back to being just a hum. She doesn't know what she smelled. She still couldn't say. She might never smell it again. It might have been something on the coat of the person who walked past her, or something coming from the bakery section, or some combination of warmed plastic and detergent and the air of this particular supermarket on this particular evening that won't ever happen exactly this way again. Or it might happen tomorrow, in a different shop, in a stairwell, on a train. She has no way of knowing. She doesn't know where it would take her either. The kitchen, again, maybe. Or somewhere else. A place she hasn't thought about in 20 years and won't think about until the smell arrives, and then she'll be there. She knows one thing. She knows she couldn't say what the smell was. And she has stopped trying to find the word. She puts the yogurt in the trolley and keeps walking.